Good afternoon and good morning to everyone out there, and welcome to the last Range of 4 webcast of 2017. And today we are talking about tips and tricks for DevOps leaders. I'm Helen Beal, and I'm here today with Malcolm Namey, my colleague. Malcolm, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much. So we've got a little 3-point agenda like we like to do with you guys for these webcasts. And so today we're going to talk about, first of all, let's set the scene, right, and talk about what a DevOps leader actually is. And then we're going to move on to our tips and tricks. So we've picked 5 tips for you today with associated tricks and 1 bonus tip that we're going to give you at the end. And then we're going to finish off by talking about what you can do from here, basically. So what's next, and some training that we have available for DevOps leaders. So let's start, as we said, by thinking about what a DevOps leader actually is. But before we do that, actually, let's just take a step back and think about what DevOps is. Everyone on the call is probably going to be quite mature in terms of DevOps understanding. This is a leaders call, not a foundation call after all. So DevOps really is about making better software faster and more safely. But it's also a catalyst for change. So we all know that change is constant. It's something that's happening all the time. But every now and again, something will come along that's like a catalyst for making stuff happen more quickly. So we've seen things in IT come along in the past, like e-business and SOA and various things that kind of are triggers or things that we can kind of hang our hats on and say, right, these are the things that we need to do to make the next strides in reaching the next level of improvements, or the utopia that we're currently looking at. And of course, utopia continues to develop and move all the time. So there is a revolution going on in technology at the moment. The revolution is driven by the recognition that the way that we have traditionally structured our organisations is in contention with what we're now trying to achieve in terms of delivering things at speed in a market where they can be consumed at speed. Malcolm, anything to add there about the kind of things that are driving DevOps?
The things that are driving DevOps, people want to see real business outcomes. So whatever they do as regards to the systems and their functions, they need to relate those back to what the business is actually conducting. And it needs to be measurable. And this is the way to do it.
So if you're an insurer, you want to know that your policy conversion rates are going up. If you're a bank, you want to know that you're keeping up with giving your consumers the technology to be able to move around the world without paying FX rates in every country that they visit, those kind of things.
Absolutely. That's exactly what people want to see.
Cool. So let's think about change then. Everyone wants change. So this little cartoon says, if you ask anybody who wants change, everyone puts their hands up, says, yes, we want change. We embrace change. It's a brilliant thing. Things get a bit more complicated, though, if we ask people who wants to change. So at this point, we get a bit more of a kind of blank looks, and people think, no, I'm kind of all right. I'm kind of perfect as I am. Everyone on the call, I'm sure, knows that a big part of what we talk about when we talk about DevOps change is cultural change. And when we talk about cultural change, we're really talking about behavioural change. So we all need, as individuals, to examine how we work, how we collaborate, what we automate, how we understand the flow of things, where we think waste is, and we all need to take responsibility there. The next level of this cartoon, though, things get even more complicated when we ask who wants to lead the change. You can see the doink, doink, doink of the little robotic thing there as everyone's just rushed out the room. Leading change is really hard to do. It requires so much energy and motivation and vision and the will to fight a lot of fights and have a lot of conversations and break down lots and lots of walls. So it requires a very special type of person. No doubt the type of people that we've got on the call today that have chosen to come and have this conversation with us. A very famous DevOps leader in the UK area is John Smart from Barclays. And John said at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, I heard him say this year in June in London, he said, obstacles are not in the path, obstacles are the path. And I thought that was really powerful from kind of for a change agent to think this way, that actually this is what life kind of looks like. So this is our job, basically, is problem solving. So we mustn't think of obstacles as being negative things, but rather they are things that are naturally in front of us to consume, to jump over and just bash our way through them to get to where we want to be. I think I may have spelled John's name wrong there, actually. I'm not sure he's got an H in it, so apologies, John, if he listens to this webcast at some point. So it's much like kind of the way that we think about failure, actually, in the DevOps world. So in the DevOps world, failure is increasingly treated as a positive thing. It's a learning opportunity. Success and failure are very much two sides of the same coin. There's the old adages about spiders, and they try again, to make their webs. And this is what we need to do when we're trying to make change happen as well. So, are you a change leader? We use this quite a lot in the workshops and training that we do to explore where people are if they're going to self-nominate, if you like, as a change leader. So, Malk, the top one we've got here, so level 1, accepts need for change. This level, the change leader can publicly describe a change and persuasively defend the need for change within the organisation. The individual is able to tolerate ambiguity and create an open and receptive environment. We see a lot of people at this level. I think we probably mostly see people at this level. So a lot of our work is supporting people to try and move up to the next stage. So, Malk, tell us a bit about the next stage, level 2.
Define initiatives of change.
Yes.
This change leader can define a specific area where change is needed and can identify the leverage points for change in the process and work habits. And we see this a lot in our travels. Maybe you can give us an example, Helen, where we've seen this more recently on site.
Yes, I'm thinking about the work habits there in particular, and thinking about the difficulties that people have between dev and ops departments, just generally talking to each other on a day-to-day basis. This is exacerbated in a lot of organisations we work with, where changes have happened over time, and there's a huge kind of physical separation between those two areas of the business. So we've worked with Lego, who had different buildings. We've worked with Land Registry that had people on different floors. We worked with British Car Auctions, who have them on different sides of a corridor. And we have several customers at the moment where they might have one group in London and another in Kent or Yorkshire or somewhere else in the country. So that daily work habit of talking to each other to get something done is difficult. So the DevOps leaders in those cases need to find ways to break down these communication barriers effectively that have been put in place.
And also they're orchestrating it and pulling that whole collaboration piece together, aren't they? And we see that a lot for people that have actually been through some of our training around the DevOps leader. And they go back and obviously start demonstrating and pulling this all together.
Which is definitely moving up to level 3, isn't it? So level 3 is talking about ensuring the success of change through implementation of a communication strategy and the refinement of work and organisational design models and the facilitation of staff development. So feeding back into your comment about training. Then we've got level 4, managing complex change. So we're understanding things like cultural dynamics, hidden assumptions, differences between stated values and values in practice. And then at level 5, this kind of most strategic level, we've got a champion of change. So publicly challenging the status quo by comparing it to an ideal or vision of change, which can be quite dangerous. And this is why a lot of people don't really like the role of a kind of a change leader, because you're putting yourself in quite a dangerous position. You're putting your head above the parapet. So you're being brave and courageous. So we're going to have a little poll in a moment. Reference this poll for a second. So this slide here also refers to this online poll, where a lot of people stated that they seek their change leadership education externally, and this fact will become more apparent in its importance later on in this conversation in part 3. But we're going to have a poll now. So we're going to have a poll, and we're going to ask you the question, where are you on the change leader maturity scale? So give me a second and I'll start this poll off. And we're just going to run that for a few minutes. So, Malcolm, do you feel that lots of our customers have sort of consciousness about who the change leaders are in their organisation?
I think they do. But also sometimes it's quite difficult for some of the organisations we have been engaged with as identifying some. And sometimes we found that some of the most unlikely people are very capable of becoming the new change leaders. And we've been helping many companies over the last 12 months to bring these people up to speed and also bring new change leaders within their environments.
Yeah, and that's definitely a big part of the work that we do, isn't it? Is trying to help people mature their leader capability. So I'm going to quickly close the poll. We've had 80% of you on the call vote, so thanks very much for everyone that just did that. The poll results, so 13% at level 1, accepting the need for change, and in fact, quite interestingly, there's an even split across levels 1, 2, 4 and 5, so 13% there, and then half of you put yourself in the middle area at the moment. So thank you everyone for completing that. It was a very interesting result that we've got some work to do to help everyone get up to the higher levels. So let's move on to the tips and tricks that we've picked for you today. The first one is to take an evolutionary approach here. So let's explore what we mean by this a bit more. So many of you will recognise this. It's the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross curve. Many of you will recognise it as the 7 stages of bereavement, and that's where Kubler-Ross originally identified and put together the chart. But since then, we've learned that actually whenever humans receive some kind of shock, this is really what goes on. So on the y-axis, we've got morale and competence, and on the x-axis, we've got time. So what it's saying is when we get a big surprise, we've got surprise and shock, we start with that, and then we kind of get the morale and competence is kind of on the up, and then it starts, we've got denial. And at denial, we've got, we can't be what's happening. Now, we've seen things happen in organisations where people have done things like suddenly announced that there's going to be a big cloud transformation project, and people have gone, well, what about my job? What's happening to me? And that's really where people haven't been involved in the decision making. They haven't been empowered. So we really need to create alignment. So you'll see on the right hand side of the slide, we've got suggestion boxes, if you like, for what happens in each of these areas as we go through the pain. So as we're going down after denial, we're going down again, we've got frustration, things are hard, things are different, and then at the bottom we're really quite depressed, and then we start coming out the other side. So we're going to talk about experimentation quite a lot today, but we need to they start coming out the other side. We think, though, that we can avoid having this kind of pain if we don't think of things as big transformations, kind of big shocks that are going to happen to people, which is why we prefer not to use the word transformation. We've had direct feedback from our customers that transformations have failed in the past, and that when people hear the word transformation, what they understand is redundancy. So the word transformation can have lots of negative consequences. So we prefer to use the word evolution. So just moving on, we've got our first trick just appearing there on the right. So avoid saying transformation, but think incremental improvements. And just to kind of further explain what we mean, here's a picture I took at a conference last year. I think it was probably a year ago now in Munich. This chap is Damon Edwards, very well known in the DevOps industry. Used to do the DevOps Cafe web podcast with John Willis, the originator of CAMS. But what Damon was explaining here is something similar to what we've just seen. We've seen that change curve again with this drop. And he's saying if we do little incremental changes, those drops in performance and morale will be much smaller. So we'll overall, if you think of it over time, we'll get much further, much more quickly by not giving people such a shock. So that was our first tip and trick. Anything to add there, Malc?
No, not really.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. Tip 2, using the improvement Carter. So many of you on the call, I'm sure, know that there's a very close relationship between DevOps and Lean. In fact, we often talk about the harmonious polygamous marriage between Agile, Lean and ITSM, and the love child that is DevOps. It's a phrase, the harmonious polygamous marriage, that I stole off our very good friend Jane Grohl, who is the CEO at the DevOps Institute, that we're going to talk a little bit more about later on. But it's a really nice phrase that explains that actually in some respects DevOps is the convergence of the maturing of these existing approaches. I mention all of that because the improvement Carter, is part of the Lean manifesto, if you like, or the Lean collection of tools. Carter basically means kind of repeating like a habit. If any of you have learned or practiced martial arts, you'll know that when you're learning the moves in a martial art, they're called a kata because you repeat them over and over and over so that you get them right, and they're imprinted in your muscle memory. So let's have a look about what the improvement kata is. So the improvement kata has 4 steps. I haven't put the numbers on this particular example, but we basically start over at the right by understanding the long-term vision and direction. So this is really important when we're doing the things that Malcolm was talking about earlier in terms of focusing on the business outcome. So these are the points where we need to understand things like the organisational why and the business goals. So on this particular example, the long-term vision and direction is described as the challenge. You could have it as goals. In Spotify world, if you look at the Spotify engineering videos, they call it the awesome that they're looking for. We often describe it as the North Star, kind of the pole star that you're aiming for as well. The next thing that we do is grasp the current conditions. This is really important in terms of baselining your current state. In the DevOps world, the M in CALMS is about measurement. We must have data that supports where we are. If we can't measure it, we can't improve it, said Peter Drucker or Deming, depending on which source you get that from Google. Malcolm, what kind of things can we do at Range 4 that help people understand their current condition?
Well, we've been delivering a DevOps maturity assessment for many years now, and we've helped many organisations understand their current state and their current condition. And it is a great starting point, and it enables us to look at their current and their future and desired state, and it goes along similar roadmap as what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and we've got data points, and we also do help look at the overall vision, and we help do the next step 3, which is understand the next target condition. So what's the next milestone that we're going after? And then the 4th thing we do that's described here as test with the 3 little black feet is we actually experiment with it. So I said we were going to talk about experimentation quite a lot. Here, we like to talk about the Deming PDCA cycle, so the plan, do, check, act, and going consciously through that process. So really thinking about what you're going to do and making it hypothesis driven. So this should bring us on to the next trick. Here we go. So talk about experiments and use hypotheses. Use plan, do, check, act. So think about, articulate things in a hypothetical way. So I believe if we do this, then that will happen in this timescale, and then go back and measure it. Did it succeed or did it fail? If it failed, then do another PDCA cycle or throw it away sometimes. So tip number 3. Value stream mapping is your hero. I was going to say it's your friend, but I just felt strongly it was much, much more than your friend. Value stream mapping teaches so much about an organisation and a particular set of processes. So we've got, it's just an example of what a value stream map looks like. Malcolm, I was struggling to find one that looked really pretty. So, value stream maps actually look generally like a load of post-it notes when you're doing them, because the function of a value stream map, and again, this is another lean tool, is getting a bunch of people in a room to visually collaborate on something that they probably have never worked on together before. When we have organisations that have been growing over a long period of time and we've got a lot of silos, we get a lot of people that are in their own bubbles and are not able to understand the end-to-end impact of how an idea is formed and what the flow looks like to value realisation. You'll see that's the tagline that we use for Range 4. We are optimising the flow from idea to value realisation. So value stream mapping, very, very powerful tool. We prefer to, in an ideal world, to do a value stream mapping exercise over 4 days. So 2 days on future state and 2 days on 2 days on current state and 2 days on the future state. Many organisations find it hard to get a bunch of people in the room for that long. So we have been experimenting with doing them just in a day, which doesn't give us really any time to get to the future state, but we can start uncovering the waste. very metrics driven here as well. So we analyse things like touch time, or the time that work is actually being done. We analyse the waiting time, or the elapsed time. We analyse how many people are involved. We analyse things like percentage complete and accurate, or the percentage of pre-work, and get a lot of data that enables us to take huge bunches of waste out of processes, like up to 70% in many instances. And those areas of waste are caused by things like onerous change approval processes, difficult environment provisioning, test silos. There are lots of things that can cause problems in the value stream. So our top trick for this tip is you can start testing value stream mapping exercises in a day. But what's really important is to set the expectation when you're talking with people around you that you're not just going to do one VSM. There's going to be a value stream mapping exercise for every value stream in your organisation. And not only that, you're going to keep coming back and doing more of them as you keep making improvement. So your hero, your value stream mapping capability becomes the basis of a continuous improvement cycle. Anything to add on that one, Mark?
I don't think so. I think you pretty much covered that, Helen.
Excellent, thank you. Let's go on to tip 4 then, which is about being a transformational leader. So many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with the State of DevOps reports. We're in our 6th year of them in 2017. They underpin much of the thinking worldwide in terms of what's important about DevOps and what works and what doesn't. There is incredibly important statistical data within them that tells us things like a high-performing organisation correlates with a high-performing IT organisation. So we know if we get tech right, that the organisation itself is going to have a better chance at hitting its high-level business goals around profitability and shareholder value and productivity and all of those good things. This year, in the State of DevOps report, we had a correlation between having transformational leaders in an organisation and having success as an IT organisation and as an overall organisation. Not everyone is a transformational leader, though, and I think lots of people perhaps don't think about whether they are or they aren't. So this is why our tip is to learn about what a transformational leader is and figure out whether you are one, and if you're not, the kind of things that you need to do. So Malcolm, is there any bit you'd like us to kind of start with? We haven't got time, obviously, to go through all of it in great detail, but is there any bit on here that really jumps out that we see a lot or don't see enough of within our organisations that we work with?
We see some inspirational communication. I think we see that quite a lot. Intellectual stimulation. But, you know, there's some good keywords there. And we do see a lot of it, but not necessarily all of it when we go and talk to our customers.
I think the one I hear most problems around is around personal recognition. A lot of the organisations that we work with have got lots of technical debt and there's lots of firefighting going on and businesses asking for lots and lots of stuff to happen. So people are kind of caught up so much in the daily grind, if you like, and the pressures of daily work that they forget to celebrate successes, even in like that small way that, you know, that personally compliments individuals' outstanding work. I think it's such a small thing, but it can go such a long way, and such a lot of people have forgotten to do it in tech because we're just so busy, such a lot of time.
Rewarding success.
Yeah, and celebrating it. So our trick here, yes, so this was about the status quo. So my trick here was about sometimes it's better to seek forgiveness rather than permission. We so frequently see things happening under the radar in the organisations we work with. There's a bank we work with and a guy in it commandeered a war room, stood up an agile team in it, built a mobile app, put it in the cloud, all without being told that he could do that. But he felt so strongly that it was the right thing to do for the organisation, and it's a very natural change leader that just went ahead and did what was right anyway. Another example, actually, which is more public, is Target. So if you listen to Heather from Target's talks at DevOps Enterprise Summit in San Francisco, she'll talk about, we asked to do something, they said no, we just went ahead and did it anyway because we knew it was the right thing to do. And once we'd done it, people went, yeah, that was the right thing to do, thank you. So that status quo thing is important. Challenge it, and sometimes you might need to break out of it. Tip 5, be a coach, find tools that work for you. So at Range 4, we are consultants and we also do quite a lot of coaching as part of our work. So we have to explain to people what the difference is between being a consultant and a coach. Basically, a consultant tells you how to do it and a coach gives you the tools so you can figure it out to do yourself. It's like that thing from the Bible about give a man a fish and he can feed himself for a day, but teach him how to fish and he can feed himself for the rest of life. It's that kind of philosophy. So, there are tons of different sorts of tools out there. VSM is the tool that we've just talked about. So other ones, things like this Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, ways of helping people talk to each other and figure out within a team who's a bit like what and what do we do when things are getting difficult. So our trick here, this is Dan Pink, basically. So if you look up on YouTube, Dan Pink TED Talk, there'll be some summary talks about his book Drive. And basically what Dan has uncovered with scientific, again, data backing this up, is that people are at their most productive and happiest when they have autonomy, mastery, and purpose at work. So they get most intrinsic rewards when they have those things. So it's really important to empower people to feel that they are able to choose what work to do, how to do it, that they have all the capability to do it, and they understand why they're doing it and they believe in it. Other tools, there are so many things out here. This is the Cartman Drama Triangle. This is from drawn from another book, Reinventing Organisations, about holacracy, so different ways of looking at it. And you'll see here, there's a coach down in the bottom left of that triangle as well, thinking about how to support people. We've got Wilber's 4 quadrants, so different ways of looking at different perspectives of things, and how to move that to an organisational view. So there's just, there are a slew of tools out there that you can use and you can give to your teams to help them push the message further. As a leader, you should never really feel alone. We should always be trying to kind of build our army around us of people that are all going in the same direction and have all kind of clocked onto these ideas. So to just quickly summarise the tips and tricks that we've picked out for you today. Number 1, take an evolutionary approach. So really think incrementally. Number 2, use the improvement kata. Make experimentation a habit. Number 3, value stream mapping is absolutely your hero, but be prepared to do lots of it and keep repeating it. If you never do one and then it's like done and all the stuff will happen, you need to keep coming back. Same with assessment. We can do that first like baseline, but we need to, again, every 6 months so we can see how you're improving. So we give you the opportunity to celebrate the success and pivot and things that aren't working. 4th tip, be a transformational leader and sometimes be prepared to get things done under the radar. Number 5, be a coach and empower your people with tools. Got a bonus tip for you. You can get trained and certified as a DevOps leader. We have a DevOps Leader course with our partners, the DevOps Institute. The DevOps Institute is Jane Grohl that I described earlier on, stood it up several years ago now. We've been doing the DevOps Foundation course again for several years. We've had many hundreds, if not thousands, of people now that have qualified through the Range of 4 DevOps Foundation programme. DevOps Leader is a relatively new course. We ran our first one about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. It was very, very well received. We're just collecting testimonials now. So we have this DevOps Leader course. It sets out to arm you, basically. So it sets out knowing that one of the biggest problems that you're going to have as a DevOps leader is around probably the culture that you're existing in and changing the way that culture works. Culture is a kind of big nebulous thing, but it's made up of values and behaviours, as you can see in that top quote from the Business Dictionary. And if we understand that and we can understand behaviours, we can change behaviour, and then consequently we will change the culture. So the DevOps Leader course sets out to help you know what to do to move the dial on those behavioural changes. So our services catalogue at Range 4 basically splits down into 3 areas. So we've got Explore, Educate and Evolve. The assessment that Malcolm was talking about earlier on sits in our Explore phase. The Evolve section is mainly things like our coaching and workshops and figuring out what metrics matter with people and doing value stream mapping. And then the Educate piece is our set of courses from the DevOps Institute. So if you want to get certified as a DevOps leader, you do first have to get certified in the DevOps Foundation course. That is a prerequisite. So our next public schedule course for DevOps Foundation is in London on February the 5th and 6th. And our next DevOps leader course is in March, again in London, public schedule. Malcolm, I think you wanted to talk about some other...
Yes, I do actually. So basically, we hold these classes on customer locations, or we can have them at our location as well. So you don't have to just wait till February or March or when we're running a public schedule. So we can come to you. We also offer an online DevOps Foundation course. So for people that are in far out countries, maybe in South America or Mexico or wherever they are, they can do it online, and we can provide that as well. And we've done many online foundation courses over the last few years, and they've been very successful also.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of our content today. So we now have a few minutes for questions. So I've got a couple of questions from Mike. Thank you very much, Mike. So first question, coaching how to change behaviours. Is that correct? Yes, that's absolutely correct. So the coaching we do is, again, the thing about coaching is different from consulting, is about giving tools. So we perform coaching as range 4, where we give the DevOps leaders in the organisations we work with the tools that those DevOps leaders will then, as coaches, pass down through the organisation. So that kind of ripple effect of change. The behavioural stuff is very interesting. There is a certain amount of self-awareness that has to go alongside it. People have to be willing to change, so we have to help them by teaching them new ways to do things. There are simple ways, or simpler ways of explaining this in some examples. So, for example, if people's behaviour is that they're not very quality focused, and they kind of don't think about that and leave that quite late, we can teach things like test-driven development, where their behaviour becomes much more quality focused, and actually what they do is they write the test before they write any code, run the test and it'll fail. Now they can start writing the code and run the test until it passes, and they tweak it until it's right. But the coaching, the big part of it is about change behaviours. Yes. Champions of the next question that we've got is, champions of change are like roles of an evangelist internally, correct? Yeah, I'm just going to think about that for a minute. What's the difference between a champion for change and an evangelist? I can't really think of any differences. I think they do the same job. So yes, they are an evangelist. In fact, we do work with organisations that do have people who have currently job titles, and I know we don't like DevOps in a job title, and we particularly don't like it in the DevOps engineer job title, because really everyone is an engineer. We have DevOps engineers, it creates kind of buckets and silos that don't really work too well. But the DevOps evangelist role is absolutely to have that ability to challenge the status quo and visualize the future state and being able to communicate it. So that's all the questions I think we've got from the team today. Malcolm, did you have anything else you wanted to add today?
I don't think so. I think it was a really good session, Helen, actually. And tips and tricks.
Sorry. So the next question that's just popped up, what's the best method to implement DevOps in your organisation if different teams within the organisation are using fairly different frameworks, i.e. Scrum, Waterfall, hybrid versions of Agile, etc.? So that's quite a tough question, but not an unusual situation. So most organisations have traditionally used Waterfall. Agile as a concept has been around about 17 years. Most organisations, certainly every organisation that we're engaged with, is trying to move to be more agile and using agile frameworks such as Scrum to inject agile into their capability. It's probably worth mentioning that agile is really a catch-all term for doing stuff small batch. It's about doing things little and often and incrementally. So that is a kind of fundamental behavioural change. In terms of implementing DevOps into your organisation, really what we need to do is the first thing is that there needs to be a common understanding across the whole organisation about what DevOps means. When some people talk about implementing DevOps, they might just mean putting up a continuous delivery pipeline, and that's really not what DevOps is about. DevOps is about optimizing the flow from idea to value realization. So if we have a company that has lots of parts that are moving at different speeds, which most companies do, what we need to do is baseline that state and understand which bits are working at which speed and which bits want to work faster, which bits are doing things really well, and how the other bits can learn from that. So it's an ongoing evolutionary and incremental change. Sorry, Malc, I interrupted what you were finishing off with as that question came through.
All I was going to say was, I think this has been a great session around tips and tricks, but also it gives people some insight as regards to some of our training and some of our coaching and mentoring services, and how that can help their organisations. And we'll be happy to have a meeting or a call to talk about some of the training offerings that we've got and how that can help them on their DevOps journey.
Fabulous. So we're just going to finish off with one final question, sorry, that's just popped through. What tip do you have to help change the behaviour of a VP who says they believe and support DevOps, but never wants to attend conferences, meetings, and is fighting against change? Funny enough, Malcolm and I had a call with a customer in New York just before this webcast that was very much around that sort of thing. So as a result of that, and a conversation that the same conversation that Malcolm and I are having with two other customers at the moment, we are in the process of putting together. We haven't really decided what to call it yet, Malcolm. I don't think you and I have actually had an explicit conversation about this, but it's almost like a CXO DevOps enabler pack, where we're going to put in the high-level business benefits of why you do DevOps, really hard, quantifiable. You will be able to save this much money. Other companies have done it in this way. You will be able to perform much faster, and make it as simple as possible for them to consume that information. The thing is, if the VP, the question we need to ask ourselves is really, what is the outcome we want from that VP? If we need them to behave differently or approve something in terms of spend, or approve an organisational change or something, then we have to win them over. So we are increasingly arming people to have those conversations. If that VP is a constraint or a blocker to the change, then we need a slightly different approach, which is to either work out if we can go around them, or whether we can kind of take them out of the change process that we're trying to do. So thank you everybody for coming on the call today and participating, and for all your brilliant questions. And thank you, Malcolm, ever so much as well for your insights also.
And thank you, Helen. What a fantastic webcast we've had today.
And happy Christmas, everybody, and have a great 2018. We look forward to seeing you for one of our next year webcasts. Thanks all. Goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.